On 26th May 2014, the National Democratic Alliance, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, took the oath of office. It marked the beginning of a new political chapter in India. What followed over the next 12 years was not just a change in government, but an attempt to reshape the Indian state, economy, and society at a staggering scale. Bharat Reloaded, a special series to mark the 12th anniversary of the NDA, will look back at these momentous years through conversations with policymakers, economists, entrepreneurs, and investors. It will take stock of a decade that sought to reimagine India. I am your host, Anil Padman. Much of the conversation around development focuses on policies, budgets, and reforms. But the real test of governance is the ability of institutions to deliver outcomes at scale. This, in turn, shines the light on state capacity. In the last 12 years, India has banked 50 crore people, conducted seamless vaccination of 100 crore people to combat the COVID 19 pandemic, and lifted more than 30 crore people out of abject poverty. Has India then cracked the code on execution, developed the administrative capacity it lacked? To answer all this and more, we have with us today Ashish Dhawan. As founder and CEO of the Convergence Foundation, Ashish is someone who has spent years working at the intersection of philanthropy, public policy, institution building, and helping develop state capacity, and hence a perfect person for this conversation. Ashish, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Ashish, I wanted to begin with your work, which is basically at the intersection of philanthropy, public policy, institution building, and strengthening state capacity. Based on this experience, has India finally begun to crack the code on execution, or what you often say, acquire the translational muscle?
I think we have. As you pointed out, I think India is admired in the global south for the scale at which we have managed to achieve things. As you mentioned with, say, something like Jan Dhan, what we've done is amazing. Or even if you look at our capital markets, when we changed the architecture to bring in SIP, I mean, no other emerging market, has the scale at which, and of course, rolling out whether it's roads, rural roads, Saubhagya for electricity, Jal Jeevan. So I think in mission mode, we have achieved a lot with our hard infrastructure. I do think soft infrastructure is more challenging, and we need to be more patient. But I believe that there has been a step up with the use of technology, with the use of mission mode, with the focus on KPIs, with the state generally developing certain muscle, this translational muscle, that I do think that it's been a game changer in the last decade.
Ashish, you mentioned SIPs is so true because now almost every PIN code is covered by the State Bank of India mutual fund. So that tells you how big the footprint has become. Based on all these examples that we discussed, what is your sense about, how India has grown its state capacity of the state or the administrative capacity?
Yeah, so obviously when people look at state, they tend to think of the elite services. And I think that's fine. But really what we need to look at, in my mind, is the people at mid-level and lower levels in state capacity. So if we take something like education, it has the largest base of government employees because school system is very large. We have 11 lakh, 10.5 lakh government schools. And, the reason why it's harder than, say, doing rural roads or rural electricity, at the front line we have almost 60 lakh government school teachers. And nothing will really change in terms of outcomes unless the classroom transaction changes. So I think the hard part of this soft infrastructure is that you have to work through people. And we don't recruit that many more teachers anymore because we have achieved a fairly good pupil-teacher ratio. With our demographics now, yes, we are growing a little bit in secondary school as enrollment increases. But in primary school, actually enrollment peaked a while back. It's actually declining now as the number of births has come down over the last few years. So I think we will have to do whatever we would do with the current stock of people. The churn rate is only about 3-4%. So it's not like you can get a new breed of people. With the current set of people, how do we achieve better outcomes? That is the challenge, and I think that's a slow process. So unlike building a road which can happen faster, I think we have to realize that this is a slow moving indicator. It'll take 10 years, 15 years to achieve the outcomes. But with a mission like NIPUN Bharat, I have seen that this has already started to lead to changes on the ground in terms of teachers realizing the importance of foundational learning, teachers starting to use daily lesson plans, teachers starting to do a weekly formative assessment, teachers starting to identify the bottom half of children and see what remediation can be done to help them improve, teachers understanding the goals very clearly. I think these are big changes we have seen in the last 5 years. But even as we rolled them out in states like Uttar Pradesh, we did a great job. You found even after 5 years, there's only about 60-70% compliance because not every teacher will come on board. It's a bell curve. You get the early adopters, then the others do it, then some don't. So it's hard work and you have to be patient. And so I'm very glad that government now is looking at NIPUN Bharat 2.0 because government has realized that, in 5 years, it's not like we're going to solve the problem. It'll need 15 years of hard work to actually make this happen at scale. So because human beings are involved at the last mile, education, health, livelihood, these are much more complicated than the hard infrastructure.
That's so true. In fact, your foundation has worked very closely on this NIPUN
Yes.
policy. So tell me, based on that experience, is this replicable across the country? Or, I think Uttar Pradesh is the first test case for this.
Yes. So actually in Uttar Pradesh, when we went meet the Chief Minister, he immediately said Bunyadi Shiksha is important. They already had something called Kaya Kalp, which was to improve the school infrastructure. So they were doing a good job. They realized the infrastructure was very bad shape. You didn't even have furniture, basic classrooms, etc. So they did that. But then they started something called Mission Prerna. This is pre-COVID. And the Chief Minister himself agreed to certain goals, very clear goals on oral reading fluency. Children need to read 35 words per minute in class 2 and 60 words per minute in class 3. Very clear goal was communicated to all teachers. Chief Minister took this document and made him line up all the officials. And उन्होंने कहा कि हम शपथ लेते हैं कि we will achieve these goals. So he got the whole system aligned, put a very good officer for Mission Prerna, who was there for 4 years, so there was stability. And, they have seen dramatic improvement. If you look at Parak, which is government-runs National Achievement Survey, or you look at even ASAR, which is the third-party survey, Uttar Pradesh is the most improved state and at very large scale. So they started earlier. Then Madhya Pradesh launched Mission Ankur, Haryana launched, and then after NEP, the Honorable Prime Minister decided to make it a national mission and launched NIPUN Bharat. We then started to support 11 states with this mission. And as I said, we've seen the change is gradual, but we have seen real change on the ground with NIPUN Bharat and the improvement. Our foundational literacy was so bad. If you look at it 6 years ago, World Bank publishes this learning poverty report in terms of percentage of children at the end of class 5 who can't read class 3 text. And basically, if you've missed the bus, you missed it permanently. Because the curriculum by then assumes that you have to read, right? So 55%. And sub-Saharan Africa is much worse. But if you looked at countries like China, they were at 15%. Developed world was in single digits. So India has a long journey. And normally countries are improving at the rate of 0.7 percentage points per year. So if India had to follow the normal trajectory, even in a decade, we would get from 55 to 48% of children. I think because we started NIPUN Bharat, we are attempting to bend the curve. It's called bending the Preston curve, and I think we can do it much faster. I believe we'll go from 55 down to 25. It may take 15 years, but it'll be much faster than any other country has done it before.
Interesting. Subtext of the example of NIPUN Bharat that you cited is again this mission mode, that where the UPCM threw his weight
Yes.
behind it, and now the Prime Minister is building on that success. So there's a pattern here. Whenever India pursues something in mission mode, like say foundational inclusion, which I
Yes.
cited several examples about poverty, banking, and etc. But somehow this success doesn't get emulated in daily urban governance, for example, like the hygiene, sanitation, basic facilities. Why is that? Why is this rather contrasting behavioral approach to delivering on governance at two levels? Mission mode, yes, but non-mission mode, maybe.
Yeah. I think you're very right. And look, mission mode definitely energizes the system because you have a senior political leader, whether it's the Honorable Prime Minister, Chief Minister, who is bringing energy, bringing focus to an issue. It changes the bureaucratic culture in that area, and they know that there's greater accountability, and results have to be shown in a finite period of time. But I think we do need to reflect on how do we institutionalize this in a sense, because we can't forever be working in mission mode. I think for now, mission mode is the solution. But I personally believe that because states are responsible for a lot of the service delivery ultimately, we need to look at an architecture in state level where there's certain capacity that's built to make this happen. So CGIS, which is an organization I started with Karthik Mullidharan, we are attempting to do this. So our pilot state was Telangana, but now we've gone to about 7, 8 states. What we are attempting to do is build 3 units in the state: a data analytics unit, a financial analytics unit, and an HR unit. So I think what you need institutionally is, firstly, across education, health, nutrition, early childhood development, all of these, the state to define clear KPIs. And what happens in mission mode? Effectively, the Prime Minister or Chief Minister is saying, I want this done in a certain time frame. I want X million, 100 million, hundreds of millions of bank accounts on board. So there's a clear goal. And then there's energy and measurement and regular reviews and etc. Now, if you look at a country like Malaysia, it has improved dramatically. I mean, on service delivery, they are far ahead of India, even economic development. They set up a unit called Pemandu inside government, which is like a service delivery unit. And what does that unit do? It was embedded in the Prime Minister's office. Its job was to work with the Prime Minister to define clear KPIs across different areas. Do it in consultation with the ministries and with the states. So you get their feedback as well, you get their buy-in, you agree on the KPIs. You use administrative data, but administrative data everywhere in the world tends to be somewhat inflated. So they also use third-party data. So they got independent data done, which was used then. And by the way, Telangana did this. They did an independent KPI survey after embedding KPIs with the different departments. The survey was representative at the district level. So at every district, you could know how performance was happening. And that brought about a certain degree of performance. So now, to do that well, the reason I brought up these 3 institutional structures, you need a data analytics unit because you need to define the KPIs. How are you going to do these surveys? How do you improve quality of administrative data? So we found you can improve quality of administrative data through randomized supervisory checks, through calls to beneficiaries, because then you can validate. And if people know that that's happening, they don't fudge administrative data. So a data analytics unit pays attention to quality of data. What are the right KPIs? What is the quality of data? How will we? A financial analytics unit is looking at how do I allocate resources, right? And the HR unit is really looking at how do I ensure that I write my job description well for a block education officer, district education officer. How do I select well into these positions? How do I ensure that they stay at least 3 to 5 years in the position? It's not churning every 12 months. Are there KRAs well defined? All of these things. And is there data and regular reviews being done so that people know? It's basically, if we look at how does a high-performing company function? High-performing company functions well because it has good, clear metrics. It has a performance management culture where people are aligned to those goals. And it has good data measurement on a regular basis. It has regular reviews, monthly reviews, quarterly reviews, etc. I think eventually government needs to bring this in a systematic way. It happens when we are in mission mode. In mission mode, you'll see that the political leader is always reviewing this, and the signal is sent. But can we build this architecture in so that it happens on a more regular basis is the question.
Interesting, because a variant of this is already in place, a dashboard,
That's true.
which whether Jal Jeevan Mission, Ujjwala, all
All
these
of them, all
national
of them.
schemes, even education too. So interesting. What you're saying is that you introduce a hybrid version of mission mode for non-mission mode objectives like basic education, foundational literacy, foundational
Yes.
numeracy. Nice. So tell me.
And by the way, even beyond service delivery, I would say even in economic areas, we could do the same. There have been no missions, but there could be a mission mode for exports. Now we track exports, and then people are held accountable around exports in certain sectors. You could have targets. Today, no ministry has a target. If I'm in the Ministry of Textile and Apparel, our apparel exports have been flat at $15 billion a year, and Bangladesh and Vietnam have taken whatever share China has lost. Now, who is accountable? Now, I understand there's a coordination problem because the ministry alone can't do it. It needs QCOs need to be addressed. Finance needs to come in to provide a stimulus or the right PLI. But there has to be some metrics as well on the or tourism. We today only get 1% of global tourists. Very low, given the heritage our country has, given what we have to offer. I think there's no reason we can't be at 3 to 5% global market share in the next decade. But for that, we'll need clear metrics and much more coordinated action to make it happen. So I think institutionally, there has to be some architecture we develop where there are KPIs, there's measurement, there's data. The finance then allocates money accordingly to drive whatever objectives you're trying to do. And then on the HR side, the people understand what those metrics are and what actions need to be taken to achieve those metrics.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you that the examples you cited where your foundation is working with states. So this is an interesting trend, say in the last decade, where lateral intervention by non-profits like yours are welcome, and they are operating in a very systemic manner. They are not operating at the periphery like previously it would, right? Is that an interesting pivot in creating the desired administrative capacity?
I think so. See, historically, we've had lakhs of NGOs that work on the ground, but they are disconnected from government. And my view is in the service sector, and many of these NGOs are well meaning. They're trying to do things in education, health, livelihoods, environment, all these areas, waste. They're working on so many important issues. Some of them even have some very interesting results. Some of them have very interesting know-how. That doesn't get translated into the system. Most of them don't even know how to work with the system. And ultimately, first you have to start by saying that the government is the main actor in development. They are the ones who have the authority. They have the budget. In India, we spend almost 9-10% of GDP on services, on the social sector, effectively. Education alone, government spends 9 lakh crore between the center and states. So anything that non-profit does, philanthropy does, is a drop in the ocean. So our role should be to see how we can support this government's mission at the end of the day. But that's the scale and sustainability. What I think non-profits can do, sometimes that government can't do, some innovation. Because they're working at small scale, they may come up with a new method. They can build evidence to see whether it works or not. Then they can go to the system, to the state government and say, I'll work with you to do a pilot in one block, one district, see how hum saath mein karte hain, kind of philosophy. And then if the state buys into it, the state can take it to scale, which no non-profit can. So, but you have to embed it inside the state. And in that process, you have to be an invisible actor. See, at the end of the day, we recognize government is the main actor. They're doing the work. We are there only to support in some small way. I think a lot of NGOs also want credit. A lot of CSR wants credit. I think you can't be in the credit game. I think you have to be an invisible actor like government because they are truly the ones driving it. Let it be their mission. Let them take the ownership and let us all support in making that happen. I think if we do that, then CSR money, NGO energy, philanthropy will all get harmonized to deliver results at scale.
Basically, it's like building a trust
It's a
between.
trust. It's a trust. And as I said, first and foremost, recognizing that the government is the main actor. It's there. NIPUN Bharat is the government's program. We are a small speck trying to support in some way and help in some way. But ultimately, it's the government. If I look in the states we work in, it is the teachers, it is the middle management, it is the district officials, it is the state officials, and ultimately then the ministry who are really driving this change.
And Ashish, when you develop this kind of capacity within the system, like in a state government or a union government, in a particular sector like education, the example we are discussing, do you see that then this compounds to this learnings compound in other sectors where they start getting implemented because the state government or the union government realizes these are benefits that can be replicated in other areas?
I think it's naturally happening in other areas. I see, like Piramal Foundation has done some great work in health and worked in the aspirational districts, now working in some of the poorest states in India. Tata Trust has worked with some state governments on nutrition. I think a lot of people are now realizing that working systemically makes sense, and they're partnering with state governments or partnering with the center to do it. So this is happening across other areas. Not because it's happening in education. I think naturally the state wants to improve. Chief ministers, as you said, have dashboards. They see the results. They see key on health. I am now middle of the pack. How do I become better? How do I get into second quartile, first quartile? How do I improve my rank? I see that in every state. There is a desire to want to do better. And they are willing to seek out partners in making that happen. I think the longer term, though, we need more institutional capacity. Like I always say, while we may be helping a few states with NIPUN Bharat, ultimately we need in the state a cell in the SCRT that is focused on foundational literacy and numeracy. We need a special cell in the department that makes this a priority. So that long term, this becomes an institutional structure. I'll give you an example. I went to China to see the school system in Shanghai because Shanghai was number one in PISA. And so I went about 10 years ago. And in addition to the department, they had a education research institute in Shanghai, 400 people working there. And their only job was not theoretical research, was action research. They were going and observing teachers, they were finding best practices, codifying it, replicating it. They were seeing what is working, what's not working. A lot of action research, a lot of real data, because whatever data may have been there, they were going and doing dipstick studies to find out what was going on. And that was really an institutional structure for the system to keep improving. You didn't need an outside force. With any scheme we know, the best scheme with the best intention, when it lands on the ground, has to be iterated multiple times before it delivers results. Even in the mission mode, when the push has come from the top, you start somewhere, but you see how many times they have iterated to improve it before it drives forward.
The final thought that based on the last 12 years, based on your own experiences, very short response as to is the cup half full or half empty?
I'm in the half full camp. I think that we are poised to do great things as a country, both economically and also on the development side. I can tell you that when I travel across the world, some countries already have done a much better job. They started earlier, like China on human development and economically also they did better. Vietnam, I think, really prioritized human development early on, much before India did. So we may have started doing it more recently, but they have been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. I think the communist system brought this focus on basic health, basic education very early on. So I think that we've started on the journey. As I said, the hard infrastructure part, we have the formula. On the soft infrastructure part, we are developing the formula, and we need the patience. I think with slow-moving indicators, nobody has taken an education system from poor to fair to good to great and lagaud a chalang and done it even in 1 decade. It's a journey, even from poor to fair is a decade, 15-year journey. Then you get to the fair level and you go to good. That's another 10, 15-year journey. Even in Singapore, when they went from good to great, was a 20-year journey. So I think in this, the problem is political cycles are shorter. So you need leaders who have the confidence to back something for a longer period of time, because you may not see immediate wins like you see when a road is constructed or when water comes to a home. You do see certain so what we also realize, because obviously politicians want to show a win, like say with reading is a very hard task. So to improve reading at scale where every child can read with meaning will be impossible in 5 years. But we see that, look, about 30% of children couldn't even read letters. Can't we solve that problem in 5 years? Of course we can.
True.
We can do that. Can we at least show that the child can start to read basic text in front of their parent a little bit better than they were doing before? Of course we can. So I think we have to pick a ladder of metrics, I call it. The eventual goal may be hard, but then there are these things behind, which are easier to achieve, and you can show, and it's part of the ladder of progress. So I think that's very important in order to keep the political salience high behind these issues.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Ashish.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The first phase of India's transformation was about expanding access to banking, to sanitation, to healthcare, to opportunity. The next phase may be about something harder, building the institutional capability to convert access into outcomes, building a state with a high administrative capacity so that it has the ability to do the right things efficiently and get out of the way when necessary. Our conversation with Ashish revealed India has taken more than just baby steps in this direction, because in the end, development is not measured by what governments announce, it is measured by what citizens experience. Thank you for watching.